On behalf of India Foundation, I warmly welcome you all to the panel discussion on new regime in Nepal, implications for India. This event is being jointly organized by India Foundation and India Habitat Center. We are privileged to have with us today an eminent panel of distinguished speakers: Shri Ranjit Rae, former Ambassador of India to Nepal, Vietnam, and Hungary; Professor Sangeeta Thapliyal, Professor CIAS, School of International Studies, JNU; and Shri Vivek Johri, former NSA, Mauritius, and former DG BSF and former DGP, Madhya Pradesh. May I request all the distinguished panelists to kindly come up on stage. This session will be moderated by Captain Alok Bansal, Executive Vice President, India Foundation. Please join us on stage, sir. Over to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's discussion on the new regime in Nepal and implications for India-Nepal relations. And the elections in Nepal have actually ushered in an absolutely new regime. And when we say new regime, I think when proportional representation was introduced as one of the means of electing parliamentarians in Nepal, it was a given that no party will ever have that sort of an absolute majority. It was perceived because invariably proportional representation often works as separate electorate and allows minuscule ideologies, minuscule ethnic and religious groups to have their representation, and as a result you generally have a parliament which was fragmented. And we generally saw that, I think, ever since the new constitution came in. The governments were generally coalition governments with not absolute majority. But what happened is phenomenal, actually. Despite half the seats, almost half the seats being filled by PR, you have a party which has come with an overwhelming majority. And it's not something which was a surprise. I think, there in Nepal just a few days before elections. And I think everyone that I met probably had the same prediction, that RSP will be number 1, Nepali Congress will be number 2, UML will be number 3, and Maoist will be number 4. Now, people were so confident. Of course, they probably did not visualize this sort of a wide disparity that would come through, but it has come. Now, human mind often perceives that anything that you don't understand is not good. Very often you'll say, if you don't understand anybody, you perceive that it's dangerous. And that's what many analysts in India perceive. Something which is a new animal, so it has not got to be, probably doesn't have to be good to us. And that's what I think we need to rectify. I think it's a party which has come up with an overwhelming majority. Of course, it has two important persons. You have an individual who basically garnered vote, Balen Shah, who's become the Prime Minister. I think during my stay in Kathmandu, I had no doubt that the vote that was being cast was for Balen Shah. He needed a political party, so he went and joined a political party. But political party already has a leader. So there are issues when you have an existing leader and a new inductee. So there are factions within the party. How will it play out? All these are issues which probably we'll have to look, because Prime Minister Oli has been arrested. One of the few initial tasks that were done by this particular government. But Oli has definitely left a festering wound which will probably take a long time to heal, and I don't think so there is any solution to that. So any regime that comes, how will it deal with India-Nepal relations will always be a question mark. So today we have a really expert panel here, and I think without wasting much time, I'll now request our panelists to speak. I'll first request Ambassador Ranjit Rae, who has been India's ambassador to Nepal. Of course, he has also been to India's ambassador to Hungary and Vietnam and all those. But what is relevant for today is that he has been ambassador of India to Nepal, and he's one of the most respected Indian ambassadors in Nepal. When you go and talk to people, I think people really remember him very fondly. See, being an envoy to any other country need not endear you to that country. But he is one of those rare diplomats who is talked very highly of in Nepal. So without wasting much time, I'll request you to speak for 10 to 15 minutes. That's important.
So thank you, Alok. Thank you to the India Foundation and the Habitat Center for inviting me to discuss a subject that is very close to my heart. As I was talking to Vivek just now, Nepal never leaves you. It kind of always stays with you, it grows on you. But what has happened in recent days is a very dramatic rupture from the past. It's led to a generational change in the politics of Nepal. The old guard has really been swept aside, and you have a whole new generation of political leaders, very new to politics. Most of them are young professionals. They have, high achievers in their respective fields. They all come from their own specialized fields. Many have been educated in India. The Prime Minister and several other ministers have been educated in India. Others have been educated in Western countries. And these are not ideological people. The movements of today are not based on ideology. They're based on good governance, anti-corruption, economic development, meeting the aspirations. And this has been, in Nepal, has really been a youth-led movement. It's a very major development in our neighborhood, and I think it has a lot of lessons for us in terms of how we are going to approach this new phenomenon in Nepal. Apart from being less ideological, there are certain other very interesting features. All societies have political, social, economic fault lines. In Nepal, there was the fault line between the hills and the plains, between the Pahadis and the Madhesis. And these fault lines were very, very salient in the past. In this election, these issues of identity were not relevant at all. And in the person of the current Prime Minister of Nepal, he kind of bridged this political fault line. He is a Madhesi by origin, but his Karm Bhumi, where he worked, was in Kathmandu as mayor, and of course, he was a very popular rapper whose songs spoke about, against corruption, better governance, and things like that. So this was in his individual person, he really bridged these fault lines in Nepal, and so these political issues of the past no longer seem to be as relevant today. Not to say that they'll disappear, but at least in this election, they weren't that relevant. So that is, one very important element. Secondly, while individual charisma is very important, I don't think one can downplay the fact that, he joined this new party, relatively new party, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, about 4 years old, 3.5 years old. He needed a platform. And so this platform was provided by this party. And this party, by itself had done extremely well in the last round of elections. They had secured, I think, 20 or 21 direct seats. So you could see over the last few years that there is a huge discontent, disenchantment with the traditional politics and the traditional leaders in Nepal. It was always the same faces. They were rotating the position of prime ministership amongst themselves. So there was no expectation really amongst the young people that giving them a chance once more would bring about any change in governance in the country. And hence this great attraction of, the younger leaders. So now this government has a phenomenal majority, almost too short of a 2/3 majority. But of course, they have no representation in the upper house. And for major changes to the constitution, etc., you obviously need support of the upper house as well. But 2 years down the road, things may change. Their upper house is very similar to our Rajya Sabha. So, this government, I think before it has 3 major tasks. The most important, of course, is the whole question of the Gen Z movement of the 8th and 9th September. And that was really the, how shall I say, that was really the development that really pushed support for this, for the RSP and Balen Shah and other leaders in Nepal. And there are two aspects to this. The first, of course, is the young people who were killed in the police firing. And the second is the arson and looting that destroyed all state property the next day. So there was a judicial inquiry into this. And while they've been very clear in terms of what happened on the 8th and who's responsible, and the former Prime Minister, the former Home Minister, some other people have been arrested, on the mayhem and the arson the next day, the report has been less than clear. So the government has acted on the first part of the report. They've picked up some of these political leaders. This has caused a little bit of concern in some of the civil society circles and legal circles on the grounds that due process has not been followed. But the fact remains that the court has agreed to extend the remand judicial custody of these leaders. On the 9th of September, when the arson and mayhem took place, so there's a lot of speculation as to who were the people responsible for it. And they say responsible for it were not only the hooligans and anti-social and criminal elements that jumped into the fray, but also the cadres of political parties, including the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, which is now the party in power, and including some of the key ministers and leaders of the party today. So it remains to be seen how this aspect is going to be dealt with. The government is committed to establish another commission of inquiry to go into these issues in great detail. The second set of issues relate to the functioning of the constitution. If you recall, the last government, the Oli Deuba government, had come together ostensibly on the grounds of reviewing the constitution and making it more efficient. There was this belief that nobody will ever secure a 2/3 majority, and so they wanted to change the system of voting, etc. So this government has said that, we would like to make the constitution more effective, more efficient, and they've set up some sort of a group under, a relatively unknown political figure. He used to be a member of parliament earlier and is very close to the prime minister. So here again, there have been some concerns as to, the fact that the constitution is a very, very substantive document. It is something that represents a kind of fragile compromise between different interest groups in society, and it came up after this huge Maoist insurgency which killed 17,000 people and after the Madhesi agitation. So it's a sensitive document, and I don't know how exactly this process is going to evolve, but what I do know is the idea is that they want to develop some sort of consensus. They're looking at all party manifestos in terms of what they say about the constitution and take it from there and see if they can actually bring about some agreements. And the most important element, of course, is their anti-corruption and good governance promise. And so they have arrested some middlemen, they've arrested some business leaders. Some people are saying, look, you're going too fast, and there will be pushback by the vested interests in society. They had also arrested the CDO, Chief Development Officer of Kathmandu, for the killings on the 8th of September, but then he was released. I think they realized that, this would create a lot of issues in the bureaucracy. And without the support of the bureaucracy and the armed forces and the police, they really will not be able to deliver on their programs. So it's a new set of people, young people, who do not have experience of governance and are very enthusiastic, very dynamic, want to do things quickly, want to be better than their predecessors. So some of these issues, I dare say, will arise from time to time, and there may be decisions that are then withdrawn subsequently. Just 2 or 3 more points, if I may. For India, what does this mean? So I think for India, it means that there is a huge political churn going on in our neighborhood. That there is a youth that is very empowered, is digitally aware, has aspirations, and is not willing to tolerate governments that do not deliver on the aspirations of the youth. So I think this is something we really need to internalize in our entire neighborhood first policy. So no longer is it sufficient to deal with political leaders and governments alone. I think we really need to reach out to public opinion, and especially to what the youth are saying. And I think we have the director of the Habitat Center here with us, who had done a very detailed analysis of the trends in social media in Nepal. So I think, I think one of the important tools that our diplomacy now needs to evolve is really this in the digital field. And I think this is absolutely critical. We have to reach out to the youth. We must think of ways and means by which we will attract the youth, how we will engage with them. A lot is already happening, exchanges of youth parliamentarians. We have tried to link the IT startup ecosystem of Nepal with that in India. So we really need to think of creative ways of reaching out to the youth. Secondly, from our perspective, this is not an ideological government. Their only ideology is development. So they don't believe in communism, this, that, and the other. I think they don't, I don't even think they will play this balancing game that earlier governments used to play, balancing India with China. I really don't, I think their interest is Nepal-centric. They would like to do stuff that will benefit Nepal economically in terms of development, and they will partner with both India and China in that regard. So the traditional approach of the Chinese, for instance, of supporting supporting the communist forces, the leftist forces, of trying to unite them, of trying to make them into a very solid dominant force in Nepal, I think that has taken a big step back. Because these, communist forces have more or less been decimated in this election. Not to say that this strategy will not remain, because who knows what will happen in politics in the future. But for the time being, I think this element of the Chinese approach in Nepal is no longer so effective. And also on the Belt and Road Initiative projects, I think this government is really going to look at these projects not so much in strategic terms, but in terms of the economic viability, the financial viability, the benefit that Nepal is going to get. So I think there will be a different way of looking at some of these projects. And these are very big ticket projects, upwards of $1 billion each. Issues of financing, issues of technology, building tunnels through the Himalayas and things like that. So I think there's going to be a relook. And, I think all these young people know, they're very well aware. They know what's happened in our neighborhood, in Sri Lanka, for instance. So I think they're going to be cautious. They will look at each of these projects and see whether they're really useful and beneficial to Nepal. So the yardstick is going to be this economic and financial cost benefit, not just the strategic perspective. United States, I think there were a lot of people in India and also in Nepal, especially amongst the older political parties that lost. Ye sab Americans kara rahe hain yahan pe. It's the Americans who are doing this. And then there were some elements that came up, so and so, such and such foundation, NGOs, and so on. So I really feel that, the fundamental issues are domestic. And I think, people misjudge the extent of anger, the extent of discontent in society. I don't think any country would have this kind of outreach. And, if they did, I think we would be a complete failure as the Indian mission in Nepal to not know anything about it. So I really don't think this was the factor. I think the fundamental factor was really domestic discontent. And as I said, these are empowered people, The digital platform was the only platform that they had, especially from COVID. In fact, somebody said, this was our chautari. This was the only platform for us to discuss issues that concerned us, also for entertainment, information, news. And when you close this platform down in a very high-handed manner, obviously there are implications, and people's livelihoods are also affected. So I think the reasons for what has happened are very deep, and I don't think external elements had a key role in what has happened in Nepal. For India, I personally feel that it's a great opportunity to really focus on our development diplomacy, youth-oriented neighborhood policy, and work with the government, jointly partner the government, so that the mutual aspirations of the two countries can be met. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Rae. I think it's rightly brought out. I think the cataclysmic change that the elections brought in was primarily because of internal factors. I think attributing external motives to that, to my mind, is wrong. But what is most significant is that this particular elections blurred all ethnic identities. No Madhesi, no. The clear sweep in Madhes, the clear sweep in Kathmandu Valley, that shows. And in fact, if you analyze the elections, you find that RSP won more seats in PR than in constituency basis. That shows that even those candidates who won, primarily won because of party. That means party was far more popular than the candidates, whereas Nepali Congress and UML won more seats, more votes in constituencies than in PR. That means as a party they were less favorable, but some of the individual candidates were popular enough to draw more votes. So that's a very significant factor. Well, now to our next speaker is Professor Sangeeta Thapliyal. She, as you know, is a professor in JNU. She has been teaching Nepal for decades. But more significantly, for last few years, she was in Nepal teaching and interacting with the so-called Gen Z, which actually brought about this change. Over to you.
Thank you, Alok. As he said, I was in Nepal for 2 years, from 2023 till last year, as ICCR Professor Chair, and I was affiliated to Kathmandu University. So I did have interactions not only with the young, university-going students, but also with people like taxi driver, the one who was selling fruits and vegetables and things like that. What I saw that there was total despair, especially amongst people. The language was the same. Every time I asked question, what's happening in the country, or so they would say nothing. Ke garne, that is how, what do we do? That is how it was, kya kar sakte hain, kind of response I would get. In fact, I tried to change my questions also, and the way I was asking, thinking that why am I getting the same kind of response all the time? But it was, I'm not talking about students per se, but about other people. And then the only alternative that I saw, be it university student or someone who's working, was like going out, migrating to other places, either for education purposes or for employment purposes. That was the only way out and a ray of hope for them. All of them were talking about, frequent changes in the governments, which were ignoring ideology. So it was confusing them. It was bringing anger also amongst people, which was very frustrating for them. And most of the time, the three main leaders, they were blamed, or they were held responsible for the state of affairs. Even academicians did not feel like writing on Nepal. Believe me, in India also, after some time, it became pretty boring, as if that's the word, that what do you write? It's the same politics, but only people are changing, or leaders are changing. Prime Minister is changing, but politics is the same. Old wine in the new bottle. That is how it was. So our entire narrative, especially from 2008 onwards, was now more on Nepal and geopolitics. Whatever was happening, we were bringing in other external factors in our analysis. For example, if a pipeline was laid, our Indian media would say that, oh, one up on another neighbor. So at no point of time we were talking about people in the country. What were their voices? It was absent in our analysis. And but at the same time, youngsters, as Ambassador Rae has also mentioned, they were talking about certain things, especially about corruption, about Nepo kids in social media, and they were communicating with each other on these kind of issues, So probably it was like a lull before the storm, and people's anger, their frustrations and disappointments then erupted like a volcano during the protest called by Gen Z last September. Okay, now the protest was not for the restructuring of the state, the way Maoists and other political parties had done earlier, but this was, for clean polity. This was for governance. Gen Z people did not expect this kind of outcome also. They were not talking themselves overthrowing the government also. What they were saying, the government should be responsible to the people. And Balin Shah, who was the mayor of the Kathmandu metropolitan city, he had extended support to their demands during September 2025 protest. His name was proposed by the Gen Z as the prime minister, but he turned it down and in turn gave support to Sushila Karki. And it is to the credit of Mrs. Karki that elections were held peacefully. Coming to Balin, he resigned from the post of mayor and joined Rashtriya Swatantra Party. At the onset of the election itself, RSP had declared Balin Shah as their prime ministerial candidate. And Rabi Lami Chane, he retained the post of party president. Shah has been known amongst the Gen Z people due to his rap songs targeting corruption and corrupt leaders. In his 2019 rap song, Balidan, it had nearly 13 million viewership on YouTube. And when I saw that video, the comments below, this is before the election I'm talking about, the comments below, actually people were commenting and describing him as their next prime minister. So there was already a wave in the country that he will be their next prime minister, or they want him to be the next PM of the country. Then, so it was a strategic move to bring in Balindra into the party fold as the prime ministerial candidate. This added to the growing popularity of the RSP. And he has also used his popularity amongst the youth to his advantage. On 26th March, on 27th March, he takes, oath. So on 26th March, he released a new patriotic song called Jai Mahakali, just before taking his oath of office. The song focuses on national unity and youth empowerment, etc. And within 3 hours, it had 1 million views. That's the kind of popularity Balin Shah has, and he uses it to his advantage. Now, coming to Rabi Lami Chane, he's also very, very popular amongst Nepali people. I do not know why, but he's very popular amongst women folk also, and also people who are working outside, the migrant workers. His TV talk, there was a TV show, Seedha Kura Janata Sangh, that is a direct talk with the people in News 24 channel. It was very popular amongst people. And where he spoke about issues concerning society, corruption, people's grievances, etc. And in fact, Rabi holds Guinness Book of World Record for holding 62 hours long talk show on Buddha was born in Nepal. And Rabi Lami Chane was the deputy prime minister and home minister in the Prachanda-led government. He was put behind bars on the charges of corruption, a move which is perceived by Nepalese as a victim of corrupt political system. And he was released, of course, during the Gen Z movement. So he was not only popular, but he also had added that sympathetic factor, of the people added to that. Now, many professionals had joined RSP, which was in stark contrast to the existing traditional political parties in Nepal. Now, taking advantage of their popularity amongst the Gen Z, RSP used reels, algorithms. Now, algorithm is another factor which is credited for their popularity and their winning election also, and digital conversations across social media platform. The Gen Z protest had erupted after the social media services were halted. They were not banned actually, they were halted. And RSP understood how important the digital space is for the Gen Z politics. It deployed over 300 volunteers, including content creators and engineers, to tailor an election campaign for digitally active voters. This helped them to get connected with urban voters, first-time voters, and of course digitally active people also. Secondly, the infighting within political parties was also a factor which led many people who were dissatisfied within like Nepali Congress or communists to shift their vote to the RSP. This is what Alok is saying, that how RSP then became the party, a preferred party as compared to others, and which showed in the proportional representation where 48% of the votes were cast on it, indicating rejection of the traditional parties by the Nepali voters. Now, RSP, on the other hand, has responded to the general mood of the nation and fielded many candidates under the age group of 40, as 52% of the voters in Nepal are between the age of 18 to 40 years. Other political parties, unfortunately, did not do so. They did give a few seats to young people, but it backfired rather. In fact, Nepali Congress had also split, and Gagan Thapa was now their prime ministerial candidate. Now he is also more or less of similar age of Rabi Lamichhane, but Gagan Thapa also did not get that advantage as a young leader, because Gen Z was not rejecting just Gagan Thapa, they were rejecting the Nepali Congress per se. So it didn't help them, even when they fielded young people. So this kind of strategy for RSP paid off pretty well, because then in 275-member lower house of the parliament, they secured 182 seats. Now it has defied the prevalent thinking that no party could get majority under the current electoral system of first past the post and proportional representation. Because here is one party which has secured votes in both the categories, and it is also a movement party. And generally we have seen that whenever there is a movement party, when they go for election for the first time, they have an advantage over other parties. And we have seen in the past also, when movement parties were there, like Nepali Congress, which had majority in 1990 election, or later on, both the left parties, Maoists as well as UML, they had formed a new party called Nepal Communist Party. They had majority, but still they could not fulfill their tenure, because there was infighting within the parties, and they frittered away their energies in fighting with each other, and they could not complete their tenure. Now here on the other hand, now coming to Balinsha and this government, they took oath of office on March 27, and along with 15 cabinet members, his government has a major responsibility to provide a stable government. Here I'm comparing it with the previous governments, where the major issue was stability. So I think more than anything else, economic factors, other factors, he has given 100 points of promise to people. That will take time. He also knows it, the party also knows it. Within 5 years, they cannot fulfill those promises. But the most important thing is they should provide stability, a stable government. That is what people are looking forward to, without any fissures from within. Now, this is where people think that there is a general feeling that there could be personality clashes between Balinsha and Rabi Lamichhane. I hope it will not happen, but as of now, this kind of perception prevails in the country. Now, on 20th March, day after he took over as the government took over, Balinsha unveiled an ambitious 100-point work plan. It intends to set up a committee to investigate the properties and assets of senior political office holders and high-ranking government officials. This was approved at the first cabinet meeting of the party itself. Now, on paper, it is all right. The government has announced the abolition of all party-affiliated trade unions within the government bodies, aiming to make public administration free from political influence. I'm just picking up one or two. The directive states that civil servants, teachers, professors, and other personnel in national service positions will no longer be allowed to directly or indirectly affiliate with political parties, groups, or interest groups. And government has also decided to abolish party-affiliated student organization in schools and universities. And within 90 days of their coming to power, they want to set up a student council or voice of student, which will be, devoid of any party affiliation. I personally think that RSP does not have student bodies or trade unions or any those structures which are generally affiliated or which grow, with political parties. So they want to destroy the existing constituencies of traditional parties, and they also want to start with a clean slate, so that then they have advantage of others as well. I mean, not even 24 hours had gone by that the government arrested former Prime Minister Oli, Home Minister, and later on 8 other people. Their Home Minister right now is Sudan Gurung, who was pretty active during the Gen Z movement. He was not on road, but in the digital world, he was pretty active. He was the Home Minister. And I'm only reporting what came in Kathmandu Post newspaper, that Sudan Gurung was in police headquarters because police was hesitating to arrest Oli as well as Ramesh Lekhak. And he was there at that point of time in the police headquarters talking to them and saying that, security situation should be handled by them and these people have to be arrested. So somehow it is also seen as politics of revenge, especially by Lamichhane, who was earlier sent to prison by only on corruption charges. Otherwise, it is seen as a very hurried kind of step. And they are arrested on the basis of that Karki report on, on the report there was a commission which was set up on September 8-9 movement that took place last year. They have not even, I don't know whether they have not even read the report properly. Have they even, internalized the report, or have they taken a step which is more populist in nature? The straight away, you take over government today and very next day, a few people are arrested, especially Prime Minister and others, which has led then, UML to protest, and countrywide protests have taken place, not at a very large scale, but some have gone to court also on this issue. Now, will they be able to take steps to bring any kind of amendment in the constitution? They have majority in the lower house, but they do not have a single seat in the upper house. So that has to be taken into account as well. Sir has mentioned about how RSP will play its foreign relations. Here I would say one thing, that its economy is really hurt by Gen Z protest. It is said that property worth 85 billion Nepali rupees, or $586 million was damaged. Also, with the ongoing war in Iran, remittances are getting affected. Nepali labor is unable to go to Gulf countries. Approximately 40% of remittance to Nepal comes from Gulf countries. So that is also getting affected. So Bahrain will have to meet the challenges of undisrupted fuel supply, remittances, and price rise. Incidents of hoarding of LPG cylinders are already being reported in the media. The government has responded by supplying half cylinders, 7.1 kg, instead of 14.2 kg to households. That is how, they are trying to meet the requirements right now. Now, India is Nepal's largest development partner. Of course, infrastructure, connectivity, energy cooperation, educational exchange can deepen trust far more effectively than overbearing political oversight. In conclusion, I would say respect for Nepal's democratic process is a must. It is people's choice. There's a stated policy of Government of India also. So governments will rise and fall. Coalitions will be formed and dissolved. But India's engagement must remain steady regardless of which political configuration emerges in Kathmandu. And what I have seen, that quiet diplomacy plays a much more effective role here. India's influence in Nepal has historically been strongest when exercised with sensitivity. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Sangeeta. I think there is no doubt that economy of Nepal at this point of time is stressed, because Nepal is one of the few countries in the world where remittances are a significant percentage of their economy. So that's a very important factor, and the continuing conflict in the Gulf will impact their economy. You talked about stability of the government. That's a very important factor. Though the party has one very clear majority, but does it assure stability? To my mind, it's still a question mark. And I think elections, there was no doubt that everybody voted for Balin. But the party already has an existing leader, and there are already reports that there are two dominant factions, one led by Lamichhane and one by Balin Shah, so that probably could create problems in future. Well, our final speaker is Shri Vivek Johri, who's been the National Security Advisor of Mauritius, Director General of Police of the Madhya Pradesh, and DG BSF, but he has an intricate and insider's knowledge as far as Nepal is concerned. And over to Vivek ji.
Thank you, Alok ji. Advantage of being the last panelist is that you don't have to speak much. Just agree with what other speakers have already put forth. Of course, both of them are experts on this particular subject. So I need not ponder much on the things which has already been covered. But I would like to put one or two points of my own thinking with reference to 2, 3 points. First of all, sir, the balancing game which the previous governments in Nepal had been playing, which was mentioned by Ambassador Ranjit. Now, my own view is, sir, do they have a choice of not doing it? The thing is, it's a country fully landlocked and squeezed between two major countries, no access to sea. What choice do they have but not to have a balancing policies? And if we go by the current set of statements from the present young leaders, it appears that the new government is bent upon or have its own mind to pursue a more assertive and independent sort of foreign policies and other matters as far as dealing the two big economies which are surrounding them. So this is one thing. Probably any country in that position will be doing the same. Why not take advantage of both the sides? So that psychology I don't see is going to change with new setup in Nepal. The new generation which has taken over is much more smarter, much more tech savvy, much more well connected globally. They also would be having the same feeling that why not take advantage of both the sides. That was one point I would like to make. Then, sir, about possibility of any fissures in the government. We have seen earlier this type of majority was once before enjoyed by the Nepali Congress also. Then the party itself got divided. Now this history in Nepal has been like that, and it is not a very favorable one as far as considering a party which is doing well in an election will stay strong throughout the period of 5 years. So that caution this new leadership will have to take. And for India, the implication will always be important because our own relationships with them, our own the assistance we gave, the cooperation which we achieved, the set of procedure, rules, relationship being developed, all that gets affected if the party gets divided and the government is not able to complete the term. So probably it will be in India's interest also that the party which has won so handsomely stay put together. Now whether that is achievable or not, only time will tell. As I said, history of Nepal is not very kind to them on this aspect. But yes, the current election itself is something which is changing the history of Nepal. So we might find a much more smarter people in the government understanding this tricky thing and try to overcome it. Then, sir, about the Gen Z, as this agitation was named after, this, of course, is something which we also have to be learning and understanding the dynamics, what was happening in our neighborhood, one by one. Of course, it all resulted because of domestic factors that already highlighted by other speakers. But what caused the young generation to suddenly take it up? It is not that this dissatisfaction was not there in Nepal. Madam Sangeeta also pointed out that this had been simmering since long. The way the three parties were having musical chairs of Prime Minister, it was being talked about throughout all the cross sections of society. But the society was not reacting to it in the way the youth decided to react. So this is something which, as a democracy, we have to learn and understand what was the reason and why the youth suddenly decided to take things in their hand. Okay, it's a small country, probably it's more easy to mobilize, but the old parties which have cadre from city to the rural areas down the line, if they could not catch the pulse, then something is seriously problematic with the system of democracy. That is where India has to learn its lessons and take care in its own consideration. Popularity of Balain, Madam Sangeeta has mentioned, yes, I have been following his raps. Jai Mahakali is something which I would recommend everybody to listen. It's a very addictive rap, very addictive, and this has been the USP of Balain. He picks up the issues, not like other rappers who do take up some issues which are related to society. In India, we have some examples of that, whether it is Chamkila or whether it is some other rappers who focused on the social problems in the community, and then they decided to convert it into a rap, and they got a very good response. Balain has been an expert on this, and not only he takes up those issues, but the way he spins his music around those issues is really, really something to see and enjoy also. If I can, at my age, can enjoy that rap, I am sure everybody will like, and Gen Z is, of course, liking it to the hilt. So he is a clever person. This is what I would like to say. It's not that he was doing only to vent out his own frustration. He definitely planned it in a very systematic manner. He had an ability, and he used it to convert those abilities into such a big movement and such a promising leadership he has sort of built out of this ability. So he should be a pragmatic one also. This is what we can hope, and should succeed in his endeavor. As I said, for India, probably it will be better if a stable government continues and completes its full term, because neighborhood, any disturbed neighborhood is not good for us. And for that, we have seen in the past, I will point out some security implications for India. We have seen in the past how territory of Nepal and the open borders which we enjoy with Nepal was misused by Pakistan's ISI, and those modules of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba were generally using Nepal as transit or even launching its operations. We have faced all that, and we could control it, but it took some time and a lot of losses. So we should always be alert on this aspect with the new government also. Now, as already explained by other panelists, that the action which the present government is taking against the decisions of the previous dispensations, luckily they have spared the police so far, against whom they have taken the action. So they have probably understood that the importance of taking along the police structure and the administrative structure in order to achieve what they have planned to achieve. So since that security architecture in Nepal is not disturbed by the new government, so we can hope that our security consideration, which Nepal always takes care, should this policy may continue in coming days also. Then, of course, China was mentioned. Inroads made by China has always been something which we view with suspicion. They have their China study centers, they have their scholarships, they have their very, very elaborate program of training, whether it is bureaucrats, whether it is technocrats, or whether it is the media person. And they have made a very successful lobby using these type of things. So the new government has to be naturally be alert on such things if they want to have a policy of balancing the two countries, China and India. So our own implication for us is that the cooperation which we had been receiving from Nepal on these issues should continue. That is what we have to be very cautious and alert about. Then, of course, Nepal being really a arena where Not only India, China, but US is also there. And as we know, in the present geopolitical situation, it is old saying that in politics, nobody is a permanent friend, nobody is a permanent foe. So we have to be alert on the various attempts which are made by China and also by the US, but which are detrimental or could be detrimental to our interest. So that part is also important. We have seen the US-Nepal cooperation, apart from economic, they have attempted the military cooperation also in the name of security cooperation, that State Partnership Program, SPP. So these type of things are having a lot of security implications for us. So we have to be alert on that and see how the new government decides to take things forward. Apart from this, other points, I think it has been really covered very well by other panelists. I would agree on most of the things. I have mentioned a few things which I thought is a bit different in analysis in what I feel. I can only hope for the best for the government of India, because changing the ways of handling the mutual projects and mutual understanding and mutual cooperation, which have been in practice so long with these set of 3 or 4 political parties and political actors. All that has to be changed, as already mentioned by Mr. Ranjit Rae. And I need not stress that this is the most challenging part of the implications of the new government in Nepal. How we will be able to maintain the same cooperation without being seen as a big brother or a brother who is bullying, that is to be seen. And then probably we need to be very focused, which I found the problem in probably all neighborhood in India, that we promise a lot and we deliver it very, very slow. That is where we need to pull up our socks with the new government in Nepal. I can quote one example. In 2006, we had started and declared with a lot of fanfare to establish their police academy. It is 20 years hence. Yesterday only somebody told me, you remember 2006? I was a student at that time. Now I am a minister, and that academy is still under construction. In the meantime, the Chinese took up the Armed Police Training College. In 2 years, they built it, delivered it, and left. So this is the speed which we have to compete if we really want to be more effective with the new government. This government, as I already mentioned, other panelists have mentioned, they are the young, technical mind, educated people. They won't tolerate this type of speed in implementation of projects which we promise. So that is where I think is an important implication for India, that how we sort of cater for this aspiration of Nepali population. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivek ji. I think that was really insightful. I think for a landlocked state, not playing one against another would be, I think, a foolhardy. But more significantly, I think it's not only the case of Nepal, but I think if you go back to any neighboring country, we have a long saga of projects which have been lingering on for decades, be it Kaladan multimodal project or something. And that's why sometimes I think that it was good that Hamban Tota port was not given to us, because probably in hindsight, I think that was a better option. So with that, I think we'll open this for answers and questions and comments. Please be brief, and I'll ask all the panelists to respond after taking a few questions. They are not bound to respond to every question of yours. They can choose which question they wish to respond. Please be brief, don't make long comments. And first question, I think as moderator, I'll take it. I just wanted to ask the speakers, how do you see the new government will deal with federalism, because Nepali federalism by and large has been a sham federalism. Actually, the provincial structure hardly had any power. So now this government, how do you think will deal with federalism, because they don't have any presence as of now in the state governments. So it's in due course it will come, and that probably give them. But take it with other questions. Yeah, General Dushyant.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I think they have...
Kindly identify yourself, whoever is asking questions, we just take.
Okay, I'm General Dushyant, DG Clause. My question relates to the title itself, new regime, and in Nepal, implications for India. There is something which has been, pending and which can be implemented without the kind of delay which Police Academy initiative did. And that is, can we not now at this stage tweak the Agniveer program in a manner that conveys a brilliant way to reach out to this government? This is my comment. You can respond or otherwise.
Yeah.
My name is Gurcharan Das. Full disclosure, I'm a Joint Sab of Nepal. And I was there on those dates. And all the things you have said, I can confirm that this, you have expressed really the views of the people. It's an amazing moment in Nepal, in history of the subcontinent. And my question really relates to, based on a fear, because democracy, we have learned, is very hard to embed. And India stands out as an exception. And what institutions, basically, to embed democracy, you have to embed institutions and not depend on people. And so it's you're going against a time, because every people's movement, this is a true victory of democracy. A people's movement, though, has resulted almost always in a dictatorship, beginning with the French Revolution and Napoleon. So what are the institutions? You have got political scientists here and so on who can dwell on this.
My name is Girdhar Mamidi. I'm an activist and also a panelist on many media channels. I have two questions. One, what happened to the movement about the monarchy restoration? That's not been spoken about in the panel. And the second one is, how do you see this government respond, or rather, what are the views on Kalapani, Limpiadura, and Lipu Lake? These are my two questions.
Good evening. My name is Rajiv Sinha, and I'm a distinguished fellow at the ORF. I had a question for Ambassador Rae and the other panelists too. Balan Shah is known to be a very popular leader, but he's also known to be rather undemocratic in the decisions that he takes. He pushes his decisions through. The point here the question here I'm asking is, Balan Shah has joined Lamichane's party. The party doesn't belong to him. Lamichane himself is very strong in the party. He's popular, as pointed out. But will Balan's popularity and the very fact that he got the vote, will he be able to prevail and carry the party forward, or will history repeat itself? So I'd love to have your comments on that, sir.
Okay. We'll now request the panelists to respond. They can take 1 or 2 minutes. Need not respond to all the questions. Be brief. Starting reverse order, sir. Starting with Mr. John.
I will take up this Agniveer program thing. What you suggest is definitely feasible in my view. Looking to the situation of unemployment in Nepal, probably this type of scheme will attract the youth there. But let me tell you one thing, it will not be a popular scheme, because in Nepal, unemployment of youth is a very, very major problem. They have to move out from their country to earn bread and butter for their family. So a short-term program ultimately will not appeal that much. They may have to take up something because they don't have anything in their country to do. But probably this program will have to be tweaked to suit their aspiration for a relatively longish employment. This is my take on this.
Let me start with the last question. Will Balin's popularity prevail in the party? I think yes. Now, it all depends. I mean, for me, it was like a rise of Balin's popularity. Does it mean, coming down of Lami Chane's position in the party? It can happen only if the cases against Rabi Lami Chane are not cleared. If they continue, then it is like a sword on his head. And then people will automatically start moving towards Balin because that is where, the positions and all those things are given to people. So I think that can happen, but this is one of the probabilities. The other probability is that, they live together but if the cases are cleared, then will Rabi Lami Chane then claim for prime ministership? So we don't know, the situation is still unfolding, so it will take some time. How will the government respond to Lipu Lake? I personally feel that government on its own may not raise the issue. Government would want to it is the government which wants to deliver. And so much of expectation of young people and other people are on this government that they would like to deliver. They will not like to rock the boat, by raising these kind of issues with the neighboring countries, knowing fully well right now that they will definitely not do, and knowing that, India is the primary supplier of petroleum and other things to Nepal. They will not do right now. But will the opposition, even though minority in the parliament, I think how many seats they have? 37 and 25, kitna hota hai? So, will they leave them? Because their position earlier was very different, so they may remind them again about Lipu Lake, etc. So let's see how opposition plays a role there. But I personally feel right now even people would not be interested in these kind of issues in Nepal. They want governance, they want delivery, they want projects to move ahead. Instead of concentrating on new projects, some they may do for young people, I think Balin government will concentrate on completing the existing projects. And movement on monarchy, you see, no, I've actually seen movement at that time. 2 movements took place. I was there. But how many people were there? Very few. If Durga Prasad's movement was there, Durga Prasad, who was earlier a Maoist, then he was in Communist Party, and then he became a Royalist. So Royalists themselves were, keeping themselves away from him. So Rashtriya Prajatantra Party did not give support to Durga Prasad. So this movement in support of monarchy, I am not sure if it is very strong. The people do talk about it, okay? But to think that the movement is so strong to bring him back on the seat is too far-fetched, according to me. Would you like to take the rest?
I'd like to add something on
Yes, sir.
I'll come back to you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so just a couple of points on federalism. It's very interesting because see, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party 4 years ago, this was really a hill-dominated, urban-centric kind of party, and they refused to participate in the provincial elections. So they were not really keen on this whole federal concept. Actually, none of the leaders in Nepal were. This came in only because of the agitations of the Madhesis and the identity politics of the Maoists. But the way it was designed, it was meant to fail. So the Hill leaders were not in favor of federalism. However, in this election campaign, which Mr. Balendra Shah, who's a Madhesi by origin, launched from Janakpur, and there he made very interesting comments, and he said to the people of the Tarai, of the Madhes, you should go to Kathmandu only to visit Pashupatinath and for a holiday. You should not have to go to Kathmandu because you need some work done from the government. That should be done for you here. So I think he has changed this federalism discourse as an individual charismatic leader. So I don't know how the party is going to respond, but as far as I can understand, I think federalism is here to stay, and perhaps a better and more improved federalism following this constitutional review. Agniveer program, absolutely, we must do everything we can to get this program revived. The fundamental issue, concern that at least the old leaders of Nepal had, with whom I've engaged, was that these are well-trained people in weapons. They will come back to our country after 4 years. We have a long experience of Maoist violent insurgency in our country. This will create instability for us. We don't want this. So, of course, the main issue is no pensions. I mean, the most attractive thing about this program was pensions. But this is the other issue that is not spoken about in public. So I think we need to make a special dispensation or increase the retention figures of Gorkha soldiers, because this is a tradition which is more than 200 years old, and we've just let it go without any discussion. And when the scheme was brought in, we did not even consult the Nepalese. So, I think there's a lot of bitterness in the manner in which this was handled, but I think it's absolutely critical that we should see how we can revive this tradition. Individuals versus institutions, democracy. Just one story. I was a young second secretary in Uganda in 1986, and Yoweri Museveni had just won, he had just overthrown the government of the army chief and marched into Kampala, and he had a first meeting with the diplomats over there. I was second secretary, acting high commissioner. And he says, look, I've only come for 4 years to change the system and make it better and, give better governance. It's now 40 years since 1986. So whether this will happen in Nepal or not, I don't know. I think it's critical that institutions are strengthened. Charismatic individuals are important. Institutions need to be strengthened. As the mayor of Kathmandu, Balen had this aura around him. He was not very accessible. He used to work with a very small coterie of people around him. Hopefully, all that will change. And I can see it changing because, in recent days, he has been meeting members of parliament of each of the federal provinces of Nepal, to try and understand what the issues are, how the budget should be formulated, what the priorities should be. So I think Balen as prime minister perhaps is going to be different from Balen as the mayor. On the monarchy, just one point. In the last election, the pro-monarchy party got about 6% of the vote. In this election, they've just got about 3% of the vote and one seat. One seat in the first past the post. So I don't think the monarchy, there is some sentiment and nostalgia. I don't think it's going to happen. On Kalapani, yes, this is an issue, and no government of Nepal can go against this. It's an emotive issue. There's a 2/3 constitutional amendment, so they are duty-bound and law-bound to articulate their position. But I think now that you have a government that has almost a 2/3 majority, so I think the problem we had earlier was that, since there's a constitutional amendment in Nepal, what are we to discuss? If we discuss with a government of the day in Nepal, then there is no guarantee that any solution that emerges will secure this 2/3 majority in parliament. So that issue has now disappeared because this government has a 2/3 majority, and of course not in the upper house, but hopefully in the future as well. So at least negotiations can begin. This is going to be a long drawn out process. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think it's important that we ensure that at least discussions begin on the irritants in the relationship, like the 1950 treaty or the boundary issue, so that they don't fester. I think the situation of we won't talk to you on this issue should change now. And I really think, we should start discussing these issues. Everyone knows they're going to be long drawn out, take a long, long time. But, this should not hamper the very substantive economic and development partnership we have between the two countries. Finally, I think our delivery has improved, project delivery. I think a lot has been done. Much more needs to be done, there's no doubt about it. But we, for instance, the oil pipeline was built in record time, well ahead of schedule. So yes, this is a refrain that you hear from time to time, but I think efforts have been made for joint monitoring of projects and to improve project delivery. So hopefully in the future, you'll hear less and less of, India promises, but China delivers.
We'll take now next round. Yeah.
My name is Bagai. As a complete layman, I just have two issues on my mind. Number one is the air accidents. I lost my own colleague many years ago, and now there's an average of 2 air accidents every year in Nepal. What is being done about that? India can do something about it, I'm sure. And secondly, there's a rising fear among Indian families not to keep anyone associated with Nepal. So how do you improve this trust between the average Indian and the average Nepal, as far as crime goes, as far as cars getting stolen and so on? Thank you.
Okay, here, yeah.
Okay, my name is Bharat Bhushan, I'm a journalist. I have 2 or 3 points. First, the role of external forces in regime change in this region. Are we just dancing around the issue? Because is there a pattern? I mean, you had Afghanistan, where there was regime change. Can we say there was no external force involved? There was regime change in Pakistan, when Imran Khan was thrown out and a new government came. No external force was involved. Sri Lanka, there was a regime change. Can we say in Bangladesh there was no external force involved, even if indirectly, because facts show that it was involved? In Nepal, people have been saying it. Is it just a conspiracy theory? So I'm just wondering whether there is, we need to address this question of regime change in this region and indirect role of external forces, because of course all these societies in South Asia are badly governed, and there's a governance problem in each one of them, and in each one of them there's high unemployment and youth is upset. And is there a pattern? Can we compare it with what happened in the Arab Spring? So I'm saying these are questions we need more serious answering than saying that there is, we should not think in a manner of a conspiracy. 2, I was wondering whether India is losing insight into the political processes and the social processes in its neighborhood. I mean, I know for sure that we were completely blindsided as a nation on Bangladesh. 4 days before that, at IIC, I met 3 former high commissioners. I said, this woman's government is going to go, what are you going to do? They said, oh, you are being an alarmist. We won't let her fall. China won't let her fall. 4 days later, she fell and took shelter in India. So we don't know what's happening right under our noses. And then we say, we must relate to the people. I mean, for 70 years, we've not been relating to people in the neighborhood, and then we get taken by surprise. So I wonder what's behind it. I mean, why are we losing this insight into our neighborhood? And the last point I want to make is about federalism. Now, if federalism is a sham, I'm not saying that's the government position, Alok, but if federalism is a sham in Nepal, why is it not a sham in Sri Lanka, where India supports the 13th Amendment and says that there should be federalism in a much smaller nation? So federalism, has it got to do with size, or has it got to do with aspirations of different ethnicities, regions, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. This is Nainima Basu, independent journalist. Wanted to understand from Ambassador Rae, again, you said that Kalapani is an emotive issue and we need to start discussing it. Do you think the government has any appetite to again start this? Because this was decided in 2014. There was a decision to have a foreign secretary level dialogue on this border issue. So do you think with this new government that will happen? And also in the immediate short term, do you think this will be a challenge for both these governments once we start resuming the Lipu Lake route for trade with China? And I think that is also a very big challenge and an issue with the RSP government there. Thank you so much.
That's the last question.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Gupta. I work on regional cooperation within South Asia. Does it make sense for India to actually post a young, dynamic, development-oriented politician as its next ambassador rather than going the old ways? Thank you.
That's an interesting question, and I'll start with the ambassador only. Let him respond to that, and then we come to
Air accidents, yes. I think Nepal has a very poor record, and in fact, they are not allowed to fly Nepalese planes to Europe, for instance. And I think this is something that the Nepalese really have to work on. I heard, I saw just yesterday that they were trying very hard to get off the gray list of the FATF, the financial corruption and so on. So I think it's very important that they improve their air flight safety. Nepali workers, the absence of an extradition treaty is a big issue. And I think a mutual legal assistance treaty also, maybe Vivek would know. But, these are issues. So what happens is that somebody commits a crime here and runs away to Nepal, and there's no way you can access that person, or vice versa. Somebody an Indian commits a crime in Nepal and runs back into India. So I think we need to develop this legal regime. In the past, the Nepalese governments have been reluctant. I don't know what the new regime will, how they will look at it. Are we losing insight into neighborhood? I think that's a little drastic comment. I don't think, I don't know about the neighborhood as such, but about Nepal, I certainly do know. I don't think any other country has the kind of outreach and connect in Nepal that India has. And for us to be blindsided about what's happening in Nepal, I think that's just not true. I don't think we were blindsided. I think we saw this coming, even 4 years ago when the RSP did extremely well. Perhaps we couldn't estimate the margin of the victory, but there was no doubt in anybody's mind that the RSP would be victorious. On the other countries, perhaps some of my colleagues. Discussion on Kalapani Lipu Lake. See, this is an issue that especially the previous government of Mr. Oli was raising. And, in fact, one of the points I should have mentioned initially is the first election in Nepal, or one of the few elections in Nepal, where India did not become a factor in the elections. If you see Mr. Oli's campaigns, they were all based on this anti-India nationalist sentiment and so on. So that's another very positive thing from our side. So on this Kalapani issue, I think the issue is there. And, I think you have to release the pressure on this issue basically by beginning discussions and negotiations. If we refuse to talk, this issue will just fester. So I think it's very important that we start talking. Of course, we are on very firm grounds. Nobody should have any doubt in their minds as to, the justification for India's position. But the time has come to begin a dialogue. There's nothing wrong with that. A political ambassador, I don't know. I have no experience of political ambassadors. I think, I think our career ambassadors are doing pretty well. And if you see, if you look at the history of the last few years, in the old days, there used to be a lot of political ambassadors. Today, you have none. So I guess, the government is comfortable. But who knows, things can change.
Rising fears among Indians not to have relations with Nepalis. Someone asked this question. I don't think so. You see, there's a cliche with kroti beti ka rishta. Okay, I realize that even that is losing its charm now. Okay, what we see now that one reason could be the strains in political relations, ups and downs, and then people hesitate to send their daughters across the border, and as a bahuar, So I think that is one. And I realize, especially after 2015, people are looking inwards for marriage-related issues, etc. 20 years back, it was unthinkable a Pahadia marrying a Madhesi or vice versa, But today it has become pretty common there. So what I see that, things are changing, generations changing, their preferences are changing within Nepal also. Secondly, I think Indian government should also not be complacent on roti bete ka rishta. You have to nurture it. You cannot take it for granted. I personally feel we've been discussing now, Nepal's relations with so many other external actors, etc. This is the only relationship where no other country has, advantage over India. So we should be utilizing it to our advantage by developing certain things. Maybe it could be in terms of projects directly, dealing with people, also have projects, which deals with young people and people in general. So I think people-centric projects and other projects in Nepal, and see to it that cultural aspect remains alive, What we are seeing that cultural relations at the people's level was working, not at the political elite level. So if we identify that as a variable in our relationship, then we might as well work towards it and nurture it. That is one. Second question is on role of external relations. Bharat asked. External influence. Okay, yes. So just commenting on Nepal, when social media platforms were stopped for some time, there was, Oli government had given time period of 1 year for these platforms to register themselves in Nepal. Okay, before that TikTok was had the same issue, but it had registered and it had a grievance officer there, and it restarted. Same thing happened with Telegram and others also. But those social media platforms in 2025 who halted were all US based. So, then came the name of Barbara Foundation also, and so many other things, So one started thinking that there is an external influence in it. If you look at Hami Nepal's Facebook page also, you will see what kind of influences are there from other countries. So if we take that as the point that, okay, there was internal issues, which was getting support or direction from external influence, then many questions have to be re-looked at. For example, issue of monarchy, someone asked, or relationship with China, and what are the options Nepal has. Then we have to re-look the entire scenario differently. Our answers will be very different if we go by that logic. So as of now, the concentration has been that, okay, this was the domestic issue, and we're playing within that. But you cannot ignore the external influences. That is what I feel. On the Kala Pani issue, one has to look historically. What are the points in history when 1950 treaty issue was picked up by the government in Nepal, or Kala Pani issue or Lipu Lake issue was picked up by, whenever the governments in Nepal had domestic issues, threat from or to their own power, regime insecurity became the national insecurity. And at that point of time, you bring certain issues like 1950 or Kala Pani Lipu Lake issue, it was brought in within that framework. Right now, so the narrative according to me should be that, was Nepal actually ever serious on these issues? If it was, then the story would have been very different. They didn't. It was 1950 treaty was at the foreign secretary's level. What happened after that? But then we had political instability in the country for 10 years due to Maoist movement and continuous political instability. As a result, we realized that two governments have not actually sat together. But the issue, the voice should emerge from within the country, from Nepal. Why should India be telling them that this is an issue that we should? Is it a problem for India? 1950 treaty or Lipu Lake Kala Pani, it's not our issue. But they have brought it up now. Right now, I think with the present government, let us give them time. It's too early to even comment how the government is going to work, But then let us give them time and see what they are they going to even raise this issue? We should not be raising this issue and telling them, hey, there is Kala Pani issue and let's discuss it. That's what I personally feel, okay. So.
Most of the questions have been answered, but what Mr. Bharat Bhushan raised, it's a pretty serious matter which needs a lot of study probably. This is not the forum where it can really be sort of dissected threadbare. But yes, the question of external influence in these Jan Andolans, whether it was Sri Lanka, Bangladesh or Nepal, As far as Nepal goes, I also am quite sure that there was no such thing. It was a purely internal dynamics and internal resentment which finally came on the street. It was bound to happen. It was very clear. The writing, as they say, writing was quite clear on the walls. The leaders there couldn't understand it. That's something else. But India, as the observers in India, the analysts in India, they were quite aware that this is going to happen. Bangladesh is a more complex example and probably needs a more in-depth sort of thinking on the issue that how it happened. Although internal factors were there also, the resentment with the local government was also at peak after all those elections which happened in the past. So there also, although I am not privy to what actually conspired there, but it appears that the resentment was definitely on local issues. Sri Lanka, we all know it was a local issue. So I don't see a pattern in which there is a conclusion that India is losing pulse of neighborhood. If you mean by that India is not able to prevent those things, then probably it's not our duty. They are all independent nations, sovereign nation, public has its own mind and they are expressing themselves. What we need to do is what we have discussed about Nepal, that we need to tailor our own policies and our own relationship with them to work with the dispensation whichever is coming with the popular support. So probably it was too hard to say that we are losing pulse of neighborhood and that external factors were involved in all these things. So that much on this, and I would say the Kalapani, Lipulade and all these Lipiadhura issue, Madam Sangeeta has very correctly stated that it's the internal problem which was always diverted by raising these issues by the previous government, particularly the UML. UML had this streak in itself and it will probably not leave these issues. But as Ambassador Rae pointed out, this was probably the first election where anti-India sentiment was simply not there. None of the party has raised those issues and RSP has definitely not raised those issues. So we can assume that for the time being, they are not going to raise it on its own, these issues. But yes, I also agree that this is something which we should start talking to them rather than waiting for an issue to be made up there and then we go for talk. So probably we need to take a lead and start the negotiation. Ultimately, it's a problem which has to be solved. And it's not a problem which can be solved in a very short time. So that is what I would feel on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the panelists have responded and it's been a fascinating session. I just want to make a few comments. I think what Sanjay ji said, ambassador, political ambassador. I think MEA has, the IFS have guarded their turf quite well. After the Nehru years, there are only 4 billets actually kept for political appointees, and at the moment generally the retired IFS fill those political appointees. Like technically if you look at it, Vinay Mohan Kawatra is actually a political appointee. He's not because he's a retired officer. That's how it happens. But I think if you have to really look at political appointees, the best place is to see Indian Embassy in Moscow. I think if you look at the board, you'll see all future president, vice president, prime minister, education minister, I don't know who all. I think now whether they were successful or not is for you to decide. That's what I leave it to you. Extradition treaty, I think some issues were raised. I think you need not have treaty for everything. You can do a lot of things in Nepal without having treaties.
I can comment on
After Ravinder Singh's case, let me tell you, today an Indian citizen cannot fly from Nepal to a third country without an endorsement by Indian embassy. I don't know which treaty governs it, but this is there. So I'm trying to tell you, in Nepal you can do a lot of things. As far as Bharat Bhushan ji is concerned, since he came late, my opening statement was that much before the elections we knew which party is coming first, second, third, fourth. It's only the margin of victory which actually was a question mark, and that of course has taken everyone by surprise. Everybody knew that RSP was winning. Everybody knew that Balan was doing it. And everybody knew that number 2 is going to be Nepali Congress, number 3 is going to be UML, or 4th is going to be Maoist. The sequence was told to me correctly, exactly the same way. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's what had happened. India did not become a factor because Balan did a very wise thing by going and contesting from Jhapa 5, which ensured that Oli did not have breathing space to even step out of his constituency and starting his anti-India rhetoric, which he would have done otherwise. So he knew that his seat was in danger and he went there. Nepali Congress also tried to bring in youth. Gagan Thapa's movement was to, they realized that the change is for youth. But Gagan Thapa chose a wrong constituency. So that's the problem. I'll now request my colleague Radhita to come for the felicitations.
Thank you so much, sir. I now request Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director, India Habitat Center, to kindly come up on stage and felicitate our panelists. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for coming and attending this program. Please join us for a cup of tea outside.